Hello y'all, welcome to Stages Behind the Pages, and today we are getting into storyboarding. Okay, so a definition of what actual storyboarding is. Storyboarding is something to taking text out of the manuscript and putting it in a bunch of squares on a bigger page. So something kind of like this, you know? Wow, this is big. Almost spilled my coffee there. This is an example of a storyboard that I've done. It's just squares, and then it's really cool because as a storyteller and a story maker, I can visualize everything really easily. I can see what's happening in the spread before and the spread after. And a lot of times I'll do like a really small storyboard, super simple. This is a more detailed one, and a lot of times I'll have to like erase stuff and redo things. And once it gets this big and this detailed, it's really sucky to have to erase it and then put a spread in another spot. So I usually do several renderings of storyboarding. Also like to include in the scene the get the idea of the composition, where the characters are, but also how much text I'm going to need. I usually refer to the manuscript to see how much text is going to be on that spread to make sure there's kind of enough room for that. At least at this stage, I like to kind of start preparing for that. I usually, when I'm rendering out the art, I actually put the text in the scene so I know how much I have and how much room I need to make for it. But at this stage, I just put like little squiggly lines. So one thing also is important when doing storyboarding is to put a dot. I like to put a dotted line in the center of the square to get to know where the gutter is. Okay, side note, the gutter is the place where two pages are connected to the book to the spine. It's the center of the spread, but also in between the two pages. You know, like, you know, when a book opens up, you know, there's like a gutter right there, you know. Okay, side note, one other funny thing. The other day I was digging through a bunch of old art and I found this page of scenes from this book I had been writing. So I wrote this book and I did a lot of the art for it. I still haven't finished it. Maybe someday it will be done. And this was some 10 years ago and I realized it was a storyboard, but I knew back then I didn't know what a storyboard was, and I definitely didn't know that it was an essential step to writing and illustrating a children's story. It's probably the side effects of being homeschooled. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. I was storyboarding even before I knew what storyboarding was. I think back then I was probably thinking I had invented this whole new thing, you know, making a story on a page. And here storyboarding has been something people have been doing for years and years, hundreds of years. Okay, back to the storyboarding. So a lot of times I do like to use this method of making my storyboards. I have quite a few in this particular sketchbook. I've had this one for quite a while, but I usually use, let's see, this one has 16 spreads. That's 32 pages approximately. I think I did end up adding an extra spread to this story though. So this is pretty much the original story for this one. This book is called Giving Tastes Better Than Ice Cream, co-authored by two best friends from Nashville. They're super cool guys. But a lot of times these days, I do a lot of my storyboarding digitally. It's really handy to be able to do my storyboards digitally these days because it's faster, a little bit more convenient. And also the 2-finger tap undo feature in the Procreate app is just so handy. I use it so much. And actually the 2-finger tap undo feature is so natural to me now that whenever I find myself sketching in a real life sketchbook and I do the 2-finger tap, I always get quite disappointed when the 2-finger tap undo feature doesn't work in real life. So even though storyboarding does take a lot of brain power, I think it's definitely one of my favorite steps to illustrating and creating a children's story because it makes me feel like a film director. I get to visualize the scenes, I get to figure out what angles I want to do for these particular scenes, and a lot of times I'll do like experimenting with, do I do a full page color spread, or do I do just a half page, or a full page but a blank page where the text is, or do I just do a bunch of spot illustrations? A lot of times while parsing out the manuscript, I figure out I get an idea kind of what I want to do. Like for an example, if the text has a lot of action going on in it, I like to kind of chop that up into 2 pages and then have a bunch of little spot illustrations acting out all the things that are happening in the text. Sometimes if there is part in the story that's like a key part of the story that's something significant that happens, I like to take that bit of text and maybe do a whole spread to kind of highlight the whole thing that's happening in the story and do a full scene spread, and it's just more fun. It adds more value to what's happening with that text. One thing I like to do before officially sending off the storyboard to the author to approve and give me feedback, I call this the pickling process. I take the storyboard, whether it be in a sketchbook or on my iPad, and I let it sit for at least a day, maybe over a weekend or something. That way I can come back to it and read it with fresh eyes. And I would tell you, more times than not, I have seen mistakes. I have seen hiccups, things that don't transition well from one scene to another. And then I'm able to go through there and fix those and smooth some things out, smooth out some wrinkles, you know? And then after the pickling process, especially if those sketches in the storyboard are particularly chicken scratchy, I write out notes in the scene to kind of point out what's happening, point out to like, oh, hey, this is this character, this is this character. You can't tell between them because they're just like little blobs. And so that usually helps the author realize what's happening in the scene. And so at that point, after I finish the notes and it's been pickled, I send it off to the author, and then they are able to look over it and give me any feedback or any final changes that we need to do before the next step. And that is it for this episode. That is how I like to go and make my storyboards. The next step is a step that usually takes several weeks, usually several months to complete. So stay tuned to the next episode of Sadie Stitches on Stages Behind the Pages. And until then, God bless.